This 1-minute clip that we're about to show offers a nice, tight summary with some great visuals explaining and illustrating the current impasse between the United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran.
The simple fact is that we need to see an affirmative commitment that they will not seek a nuclear weapon, and they will not seek the tools that would enable them to quickly achieve a nuclear weapon.
But for the Iranians, it appears to be the Strait of Hormuz.
Some new topics were added to the talks this time around, including the Strait of Hormuz and the region. These issues have their own specific conditions and requirements.
As both sides head home, President Trump ordering a blockade of the Strait, a key source of leverage in the war. In a post online, he announced the U.S. Navy will stop any ship that has paid a toll to Iran, while minesweepers attempt to locate and destroy any mines dropped in the waterway by the regime. In an interview with Fox, the president did not appear worried about how this would impact peace talks.
They haven't left the bargaining table. I predict they come back and they give us everything we want. And I told my people, I want everything. I don't want 90%. I don't want 95%. I told them I want everything.
Critics, however, have already begun questioning the move.
But I don't understand how blockading the Strait is going to somehow push the Iranians into opening it. I don't get the connection there.
For the next 35 minutes or so, I dig into the detail of this ongoing juggernaut with State of Tel Aviv and Beyond regular guest, Lieutenant Colonel in Reserves, Jonathan Conricus. I'm going to jump ahead now and bring you a short clip from the latter part of our discussion. A very sharp comment made by Jonathan Conricus.
Now, I'm not politically affiliated. I'm not a fanboy of the president. I'm just recognizing the fact that this U.S. administration and this president are acting differently. And they are telling by actions and by diplomacy to the Iranian regime that, listen, this isn't going to work. If you think that you're going to talk and wiggle and communicate your way out of the trouble that you yourself have gotten yourself in, that is not going to work. So the sooner you adjust to the new reality, the better for you. They're acting as, an organized crime syndicate. They're basically extorting, bullying, and trying to profit out of using their military at an international bottleneck. This could give ideas to so many other failed or failing states with military capabilities in other waterways around the world.
In this podcast, we discuss the peculiar reverence for the Islamic Republic regime that many Western governments and media exhibit, and the grievous miscalculation on the part of the Iranian regime in thinking that they would bring America to its knees by illegally blockading the Strait of Hormuz. It's not happening. Jonathan Conricus and I spoke on Sunday night in Israel, not long after talks between Iranian and American representatives had broken down in Islamabad. And things in the region were heating up again. You may notice that we experienced some technical challenges with the platform on which we recorded. It's great when it works smoothly, less so when it's finicky. So the sound and picture quality may not be what we usually deliver, but the substance, it's all there. I'm Vivian Berkovich, former Canadian ambassador to Israel. Let's do this. 8:30 in the evening in Israel, Lieutenant Colonel in Reserves, Jonathan Conricus. Wonderful to see you, and thank you so much for squeezing in State of Tel Aviv and Beyond this evening.
Well, I'm sure that the squeeze will be worth it, and I'm happy to be on, as always, Viv.
It's quite a day for all of us, and I know for you, you're jumping from interview to interview. So let's get right to it. We, in the last few days, have had a really raging war, and then we had a sudden ceasefire declared a few days ago. Then we have these emergency peace talks between the Americans and the Iranians directly face-to-face in Islamabad. And they lasted 21 hours, which is amazing. While his team was shut in the negotiating room for 21 hours in Islamabad, the president was taking an I'm going to be a girl and call it a sports event, which sends a message. They come out And Vice President Vance tells the reporters waiting, no deal, we're going home. And the president woke up early Sunday morning and put out a barrage of messages on social media, and also had a quite lengthy telephone interview with Fox News today, saying the nuclear issue is absolutely non-negotiable. And they moved on a lot. They came to our positions on many issues, but not on what mattered most. And so he's clearly drawn his red line, and that's the nuclear issue. But the other thing he added with great gusto was the manner in which the Islamic Republic of Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz to tanker traffic, shipping traffic, which we know is a huge choke on the global economy. And he made it very clear that he will not abide by this. What they are doing is wrong under international law, and the Islamic regime is levying tolls on any ships that it allows to pass through. I've heard the number 2 million, who knows? He said that's extortion. I won't allow it. I will not allow this regime or any regime to extort the free world and global commerce. And he then said, or this was kind of all at once, the United States is imposing a naval blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, effective immediately. And this might be my favorite part. He said that he's instructed the United States Navy to interdict, in other words, intercept, all ships that pass through the Strait of Hormuz with Iranian permission, meaning, of course, those coming out, and that they seize or take control of any vessel that has paid a toll to the Iranians. And that's a lot. I think that last bit also points the finger at China, because we know that their vessels have been flowing in and out quite freely. So that's kind of over to you, boss. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, and in addition to that, before we get into the business of trying to make sense or explain it, we'll add that there's still an active combat front on Israel's northern border. Israel is fighting Hezbollah with Israeli troops in southern Lebanon, pushing away Hezbollah from the border, bombing Hezbollah locations, holding off a bit on bombing Beirut and Baalbek, the areas that are further away, at the request of the Americans, anticipating or creating a more conducive environment for Tuesday's negotiations between Israel and Lebanon in DC. But that's, of course, another part of the picture, which is another diplomatic loss for the Iranian regime, because these are negotiations that the Iranians don't want to see happen. And these are talks, peace talks, disarming Hezbollah talks that the Iranian regime really wants to prevent. They tried and failed to get Lebanon part of the ceasefire deal. It never was, as per the US and Israel, and it doesn't look as if it's going to be. And that's happening as we speak. We have Israeli civilians in shelters. We have had rockets falling on northern Israeli cities for the last hours and day and yesterday. And we have Israeli troops operating in southern Lebanon, demolishing Hezbollah infrastructure. But if we zoom back out, big picture, kind of a superpower perspective.
Sorry, before you zoom back out, I think it's really important. I want you to address one very pointed issue, which is that the president of Lebanon is, I think for the first time in decades, saying, we want Hezbollah out.
Oh yeah, they've been saying it very clearly. And if only the actions on the ground of the Lebanese government and military were as clear as their statements, we would be in a totally different world. We, the Israelis and the Lebanese people, would be in a much better and peaceful and prosperous situation. But it's good that the Lebanese government, the democratically elected prime minister and president, are saying that we do not want this foreign interference, this Iranian interference in our domestic affairs. Yeah. Nobody elected you, Hezbollah, to launch war against Israel and drag Lebanon into it. Nobody wants you to do it. It doesn't serve Lebanese interests. And more than that, we, the Lebanese, make the Iranian ambassador or the charge the affairs a persona non grata, and we wish for him to leave because you, the Iranians, are interfering with our domestic affairs, and we've had enough. Now, the problem is that the real problem is that the Lebanese authorities are too weak, too disorganized, and lacking in manpower, equipment, and most importantly, battle spirit to actually do something meaningful about it. And everybody's waiting for Israel to grind Hezbollah weak enough and thin enough so that they'll be exposed enough for the Lebanese authorities to actually do what they were supposed to do years ago, 19 years ago. They were supposed to 19 and a half years ago, as per Resolution 1701, Security Council Resolution 1701, they should have disarmed Hezbollah and created a situation in Lebanon where only the Lebanese armed forces hold weapons. But they haven't done that, especially in southern Lebanon. They haven't done that, and they've said that they would do so. Part of the ceasefire agreement that the state of Lebanon signed with the state of Israel a year and 2.5 months ago was exactly that. The state of Lebanon takes it upon itself to disarm Hezbollah and to prevent Hezbollah from using Lebanon as a launchpad against Israel. Had they done so, we wouldn't have been at war with Hezbollah, and Israeli civilians wouldn't have been targeted by Hezbollah rockets, and Lebanese civilians wouldn't have faced the adverse consequences of fighting and Hezbollah hiding behind Lebanese civilians and using them as human shields, and as such endangering them. But it's a complex picture. But yes, I too have recognized and I have praised the strong words and statements coming from the democratically elected leaders of Lebanon. And I can only hope that it will be translated to action, because words without action are worth very little, especially when it's core state security matters like with Hezbollah.
Yeah, I think I think that's a very significant development that has really kind of come to a head, and it aligns Lebanon, of course, with other Sunni states in the region, and is creating a very different balance of power vis-a-vis Iran. So now let's zoom out, as you were going to do a few minutes ago, and talk about this kind of superpower quotient in the region.
So I think, one mistake that the Iranians have done and continue to do is that they probably shape a lot of their situational awareness by reading Western media. And if you read a lot of mainstream Western media, you would be forgiven for thinking and believing that the Iranians are winning this war and that they have the upper hand. And I think that has guided a lot of the Iranian regime's very arrogant and foolish decisions to play hardball with the Americans in negotiations and to continue to do what is eventually detrimental to them, and that is to continue fighting, believing out of, I don't know based on what, but believing that they're going to get their way in fighting or in negotiations. Another reason why they might be doing this is because the Iranian regime has become accustomed to it and used to it, and their muscle memory for the last 20, 30 years is that they can bully their way around the Middle East, bully their way around in the Gulf area, and they get to do negotiations with weak, unfocused, and folding American administrations and get their way. What they failed to recognize is that this administration and this president are different. Now, I'm not politically affiliated. I'm not a fanboy of the president. I'm just recognizing the fact that this U.S. administration and this president are acting differently. And they are telling by actions and by diplomacy to the Iranian regime that, listen, this isn't going to work. If you think that you're going to talk and wiggle and communicate your way out of the trouble that you yourself have gotten yourself in, that is not going to work. So the sooner you adjust to the new reality, the better for you. But the more you keep on digging your own grave, by all means, we will help you and we'll give you a shovel and we'll help you do it, because you're a bad actor and you've been oppressing the Iranian people for so long and you've been up to no good in the region. So it wouldn't be a loss if you dig your grave and we help you in it. That's basically what this American administration is doing. Now, what we see is the president basically taking the sting out of the Iranian bite And to put things into perspective, when we look at the balance of power here, the military and diplomatic tools that the Iranians have in their arsenal versus what the US and to a certain extent Israel have, going like the nuclear option, without really being nuclear, but really the heaviest option that the Iranians could leverage was to close the Strait of Hormuz. That is the ultimate weapon that they have, since they do not yet, according to all assessments, have a nuclear weapon or a dirty bomb. That is the worst thing that they could do. A little bit below that was to fire missiles and drones at oil and gas infrastructure in the Gulf area. They did that as well. And now that they have expanded the card, the very important and the heaviest leverage that they had in the Strait of Hormuz. They don't have a lot more to deal with, and they don't have a lot of leverage. And what the president has identified is the main weakness of this Iranian regime, and it is their faulting, feeble, and unstable economy. And the fascinating thing here is that there are still economic levers that the US and allied countries can use against Iran that would be very, very painful. Closing the Hormuz Strait and blocking traffic from even getting to the Hormuz Strait will be detrimental to the Iranian economy. Yes, the Qataris won't be happy, and the Saudis won't be happy, and the Emiratis will suffer. I care very little about Qatari suffering. Actually, I'll be a bit gleeful, even though gleeful isn't nice, but I will be gleeful at the fact that they won't be able to export all the oil and gas that they usually do. I regret the fact that the Emiratis will suffer from it, but I also know that all of these countries have big enough reserves of money and they'll probably be okay. The Iranians won't. They do not have reserves. They do not have money stashed away. They do not have credit. They do not have access to a lot of international currency. And they are at the end of many years of corrupt mismanagement of their country. What's amazing is that there's still money at the ATMs when the Basij and IRGC thugs go to take out their salary at the end or at the beginning of a month. I think we need to get to a situation where IRGC and Basij are not paid because there's no money to pay them.
Right.
Then we'll be in a very interesting situation, and then real priorities and alliances will be put to a test with regards to the future of the Iranian regime and the ability of the Iranian people to actually reclaim their freedom. And I think the economic warfare here is so important. And what the Iranians have done, the strategic mistake that they've done, is they have shifted the focus of the battle from kinetic, nuclear, missile launchers, missile depots, and the whole military industrial complex and air defenses and all of the other military tech. They focused it away from that, and they, by their own acts of unlawful economic aggression, have put their economy as a main target of US actions using military, but the economy will be the point here. And another point which is, I think, important to the conversation is that there's still billions, if not trillions, of US dollars of Iranian money, not necessarily in dollar currency, but Iranian money that is in Qatari, Emirati, and Omani banks. And they are there to be frozen. These are assets that are absolutely crucial to the Iranian regime. I struggle to understand why they haven't been fully frozen and seized by these three countries yet. I can understand Oman. They have a very warm and brotherly relationship with the Islamic regime. I cannot understand the Emirates, having faced the aggression that they have on behalf of Iran, having had their oil and gas infrastructure significantly damaged. The first thing that I would do would be to freeze at least part of those funds and tell the Iranians, what you're doing is bad, we don't like it, and if you continue doing it, we're going to take all of your money. And the Iranians will not have a lot of things to bypass, because they are very much reliant on these three countries, specifically Qatar and the UAE, for international exchanges and access to the global financial market.
I think it's very interesting. I would agree with the you pointing out in particular the UAE. They've chosen to allow Iranian money and assets to flow through their country and to find safe haven in their country. And it's quite well known that the UAE is also a bit of a safe haven for Iranians and for their spy network, or secret service, I suppose is what we should be calling them. So, the Middle East, everyone's playing a bit of a double game, Israel included. It's kind of a survival technique. But it's a bit surprising that they've gone as long as they have, as leniently as they have, the UAE with Iran. I want to focus on a detail that I think is fascinating from the negotiations. The Iranians had indicated that they had laid mines to blow up vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. And one of the things that came out of the 21-hour negotiation was that the Iranians were saying, well, we think we did, we're not sure we did, and if we did, we've kind of lost track. We don't even know. It's kind of like the game, and it was a game, that Hamas was playing with Israel about the hostages. Yeah, we know we have them, but we don't really know who's alive or where they are, and it wasn't true. And this also is not true. Iran has laid mines in the Strait of Hormuz. I would go to the bank on that. But what Trump said, and this is fascinating, is you've lost track of them? Great. Nobody is going to take the risk of going through that strait if it's mined. And if you've lost track, no one can go through safely, including the Chinese. So we're just going to blockade it. And it's a very interesting, kind of game of poker he's playing, because he is forcing them to show their hand.
Yeah, it's a dare.
It's a dare. The Iranians have laid mines, and assuming that that's true, they know exactly where they are. Would you surmise?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it reminds me of the very odd statement from the second week of the war by Iranian President Pezeshkian, who said, listen, our guys, our missile guys, they're firing all over. They've been firing at the Gulf states. We didn't really mean it, and they weren't supposed to, but you have to understand that they're operating according to orders that were given before, and we don't really control them, which was a very odd statement from a almost head of state to be saying during wartime. And I thought it was, especially lame and odd and of course false, knowingly false, because immediately afterwards, the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, issued a statement saying, no, actually, we know where our guys are firing, and they'll keep on firing on Arab states and Gulf states, and wherever the Americans are, wherever there are American interests, we're going to keep on firing, basically nullifying the statement of the president. And I think this is a similar case, and I think what the president has done is pretty brilliant. It is to call their bluff, to force them to reveal their hand, because the US has a stronger hand, militarily speaking, much stronger, and he's forcing the Iranians to show their cards and to really expose what they have and haven't done. And again, at the end of the day, when you look at the tolerance here for suffering, the US isn't going to suffer from this economically. The Chinese, the Indians, the Japanese, the South Koreans, some of the Europeans, they're going to suffer. And they're going to face consequences as a result, but they all have agency, they have options, and they can decide to join in an American-led task force and to be tough on Iran. And then probably they would get access to oil and gas coming out of that area. But I think what President Trump has done is a pretty brilliant move. Interesting. I'm sure that, I haven't watched CNN over the last 3-4 hours. I'm sure that there's already been a plethora of legal experts on explaining why this is illegal, why it shouldn't be done, why it's in violation of whatever international treaty. The same legal experts who have been quiet on condemning what Iran did by aggressing and by blocking all of the traffic before. But now that the president has done it, I'm sure that we will see a lot of op-eds in the New York Times and the Washington Post and elsewhere about how this is illegal and how this will be counterproductive, yada, yada, yada. But I think from a military perspective, very interesting move. That'll be difficult for the Iranians to deal with. And long story short, they do not have the oxygen, the economic oxygen to continue with this for a long time, while the US can continue for a very long time.
They can, except those prices at the pump are, kind of going to get in the way. But yeah. I want to pick up on a really interesting point that you made about the media and the tone of the media, and that, the Iranian regime seems to be developing its strategy to a degree around what it's reading and seeing and hearing in Western media. And, it's extraordinary because so much Western media just reveres this quite evil regime. It's a terrorist regime, and speaks about them in glowing terms of being so clever and crafty and never out negotiated. And, I've been reading a lot about this over the last few days, and especially today. And I think that the mines in the Strait of Hormuz is exactly, I love it because it's just such a clear example of so many things that are wrong in the way the West deals with Iran. And, you can easily see, God forbid, if Keir Starmer was in charge of these negotiations, he would cave just as many previous US presidents have done. And that, I think, is seen by many in the West as being clever. Oh, gee, sorry, we forgot where they are. It's not clever. It's extortionate. It's criminal. Yeah. And, but that's the way they've operated and gotten away with operating for many, many years. And apropos your point about the international law and the illegality of everything that, the president instructs the military to do, you're quite right. It was completely illegal under maritime law for Iran to just take control and make these unilateral decisions. And I've not heard any really cogent analysis or criticism of that.
Nobody says, well, what Iran is doing is illegal. They are violating the 1982 UN legislation, universally adopted, of the international shipping and the freedom of shipping. They're violating it. They're knowingly violating it. They're acting as, an organized crime syndicate. They're basically extorting, bullying, and trying to profit out of using their military at an international bottleneck. This could give ideas to so many other failed or failing states with military capabilities in other waterways around the world. This is exactly what those UN conventions, the 1982 treaty is supposed to prevent. And yet, the same chorus of people, legal experts, human rights, international law experts, who are very fast to condemn and pontificate against anything that Israel does or President Trump does. And sometimes it has merit, many times it doesn't. But it sure is quiet. It's a deafening silence when it comes to actually saying in plain English what the Iranians are doing. They are bullies. They are violating international law. They're aggressors in the region. They're firing at civilian targets all around the region. They fired at 11 sovereign states. They killed only civilians in Israel. They didn't manage to kill a single soldier. Yet whenever I'm on air and listen to interviews, all I get is this awe and respect and reverence for the fact that their missiles are able to penetrate Israeli air defenses. Now, how's the Israeli air defenses doing, and how come the Iranians are able to penetrate it? Well, let's start by discussing who they're firing at, and what are they doing, and what's their objective. And yeah, I agree with you. It is quite baffling. It would be an interesting psychological, psychoanalysis of Western psyches and how editors and journalists decide to frame a certain story, but they're basically letting a bully be a bully, and they're even patting the bully on the back and giving the bully kind of a wink and a nod of approval for being such a badass. That's the general treatment that the Iranian regime has gotten. And you know what? I'm totally okay with it, because they are digging their own grave. And they're doing it out of arrogance, and they're doing it because so many countries have allowed them to, and they have accommodated this type of behavior. So that's how they know how to operate. And I'm totally fine with it, because I think it will bring about their undoing.
It's mystifying, to say the least, that the West is behaving in the way it is, but that's a whole other conversation. I just want to, before I let you go, one more point on the financial issues. We know that in that negotiating room as well, one of the requests of the Iranians was to free up some of their assets in other countries so that they can buy food and medicines that are quite desperately needed for the population. And I'm quite certain that the Americans said absolutely, but, and the but, of course, was to agree that they will no longer pursue a nuclear weapon, hoard material that is weapons grade, and also open the Strait of Hormuz. And those two conditions, and interestingly, this war didn't start with the Strait of Hormuz, that's now kind of really risen up the issue matrix. Those two conditions clearly were not met. Among the many things that I've been absorbing today are reports that any money that is flowing into Iran since this war began is either in Chinese currency, which I know how to spell it, I'm not sure I can pronounce it correctly. Yuan, that it is in Chinese currency and crypto. And that the Americans clearly want to shut that down. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on how China may react to this, because this is a very aggressive move on the part of the US vis-a-vis China. You mentioned India earlier. I think it's interesting that Modi has been very quiet, and this will hurt India more than many countries. But this is a kind of direct, indirect challenge to China by President Trump.
Yeah, one could interpret it as an American response to intel reports that were leaked, saying that the Chinese have supplied intel of US bases and assets and personnel in the region that was substantial for the Iranians in attacking and unfortunately killing and wounding American servicemen and inflicting damage. El Udeid Air Base, various aerial and naval capabilities in Bahrain and Kuwait. It could be a response to that, basically saying, okay, you did that to us. This is what we're going to do to you in return. That's one. Two, I think that it isn't in the interest of the US to broaden the scope of this conflict and basically give China and Russia, and I'll speak about Russia in a second, any excuse to get more involved than what they have been so far. Beginning of the war, I believe, and I have it on pretty good sources, that there were preemptive agreements, diplomatic agreements between the US and China that basically signaled to the Chinese that, don't worry, you're going to have uninterrupted access to oil, which we know is what you care about. Just stay out of it and don't, think of doing anything rash or unreasonable in terms of getting involved in the fighting. I believe that happened before the war. Maybe that has changed now, and maybe there is a different American calculus. But I think it's still a strategic objective to keep China at bay and to find an alternate creative solution for the Chinese to get the oil that they need and not to give them a reason to become more involved in the fighting. And I think that's important. Russia stands to be almost the biggest winner, maybe the third biggest winner, or the non-party to the conflict that is going to emerge very, very happy from this conflict because of what this is going to do to the NATO alliance, because of how weak, exposed, feeble, and abysmal European decision-making has been, and how much they are going to be reliant on Russian energy. And I think probably Vladimir Putin is quite happy with the developments, with the closure of Hormuz, with the exposure of the flaws and the tensions in NATO. He's going to be exporting oil and gas to Europe because they're not going to be left with a lot of options. And he'll probably have a lot of ideas of creative military maneuvers in Europe because he understands that the US has been extremely disappointed with NATO, and there's going to be opportunity and wiggle room for him, which is unfortunate. Those aren't the kind of players that we want to see emerge winning or strengthened from any conflict. But with China, I agree with you. It's sensitive. I think cool heads need to prevail here, and China should be, I think, placated to such a way that they stay out militarily of the conflict. I don't see a lot of positives from angering China or giving them reasons or excuses to become more involved in the fighting.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of this too. What we see and hear is kind of canned and scripted, and I'm sure that that you're correct, that this has already been agreed upon between China and America. I would think most of it has, and will be fascinating to see what transpires in the coming days. It's early still in the US, so we'll see if and what future posts the president makes. Maybe he'll go golfing this afternoon and just kind of take a break. What do you think?
Probably will go golfing. I understand that's the schedule usually on Sundays, but
Right.
Who says that there aren't bright ideas and interesting tweets while golfing? We've seen that as well.
Thank you so much, as always, Jonathan Conricus, for sharing your thoughts. Fascinating. It's going to be quite a ride this week.
Yeah, we should all buckle up. For those of us who have unbuckled for some odd reason, keep buckled up.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian.
And thanks to you, our viewers and listeners, for being here. Later this week, we will be limiting access to most podcasts and content to premium subscribers at State of Tel Aviv and beyond. Our written weekly wrap-up will be available to everyone, but please consider supporting our work with a subscription at stateoftelaviv.com or make a contribution to Buy Me a Coffee. Each supporter makes a tremendous difference. When war broke out again on February 28th, we decided at that time to make our content available to all without restriction. And as much as we'd love to continue doing that, we simply cannot indefinitely. Thanks for considering this request, and until next time, stay safe. We love hearing from you, so please comment on our website, stateoftelaviv.com, or send us a note to vivian@stateoftelaviv.com. That's VIVIAN @stateoftelaviv.com. And if you go to our website, stateoftelaviv.com, you can find the subscribe button and take it from there. Hope that you do that. On behalf of the State of Tel Aviv core team, Jan Szabo, our creative, graphic, visual, and marketing man, Amir White, producer and editor extraordinaire, sound guy, who is also impressively patient with me and my boomer tech deficiencies, and our social media manager who pitches in on everything. Thank you, Maya Naftalin. Thanks to the team, and thank you, listeners, for being here. Until next time, stay safe.